Our first panel discussion of the day, entitled Mind the Skills Gap, covers the current landscape and necessary skills that creators need to succeed. We welcome the host of this talk, Arts Award voice contributor Neha Lakhanpaul. Neha, if you'd please like to come to the stage with the panel.
Okay, welcome to the talk. So my name is Neha. I'm a 19-year-old law student and I am a member of the Arts Award Youth Network panel. So Arts Award involves creative and alternative qualifications for young people under 25 at different levels, including the Gold Arts Award, which currently is equivalent to half an A-level. So for me, that means that I'm able to go and be part of different arts events to find out about different creative industries and to basically get an idea of different industries which I might want to go into as a career. Today, I think we're talking about the fact as to whether education itself is preparing young people to go into a creative industry and what skills we feel are missing. Maybe the skills that we feel are missing the most and how we can improve this so that the rate of education keeps up with the rate that technology is changing and that we really do have enough people to work at the rate that we need work happening in the next 20 years. But yeah, I'd like the panel members to introduce themselves.
Hello. Hi there. Can you hear me at the back? My name is Richard Dennys. I'm the head of the Digital Business Academy. I work for TechCity UK here in London.
Hi, I'm Paul Drake. I'm the Foundation Director at D&AD, and I'll explain a little bit more about D&AD when I get to speak.
And I'm Amy Smith from the visual effects company Framestore.
So I think one of the first questions that we would ask is, do you all think that education has prepared the youth for a creative workforce?
So maybe what shall I do? Shall I talk about DBA first? Because that might be quite a good idea. And if you don't mind, if that's okay, then we can sort of talk about what we're doing. Would you mind, there's a video I quickly like to run, just a couple of minutes, and it explains what we do. But effectively, tell me when it's ready. In 2010, TechCity was founded, and really one of the things that TechCity is trying to do is provide a fertile environment for fast-moving creative businesses, all kinds of technology businesses, to grow as fast as they possibly can. And the part that I look after, there's a skills area. So there was a report a couple of years ago that said we need nearly 1 million new digital jobs in the UK economy by 2017. And so what TechCity did was create something called the Digital Business Academy in partnership with UCL, Cambridge University, Founders Centering and Valuable Content. We deliver 11 courses entirely for free, purely online, and then as you go through each course, it unlocks rewards and motivations in terms of all sorts of workspace discounts, etc., etc. So I don't know if it's ready to play, but it is. Let's just go for it.
We all know how fast the high-tech industry moves and how it's very difficult to keep up with each sector's developments.
They provided me with free courses on an easy-to-follow online platform.
What I love most about the Digital Business Academy is that you feel really engaged with the people that are teaching you, and that makes a big difference. Once you've completed a course, there are over 50 rewards you can apply for, from guaranteed job interviews, mentoring sessions, to free co-working desk space.
I got involved and saw vast improvements.
I mean, the thing about the program is we now have 25,000 people registered. It's just over a year old, and I think what it's proving is that there's a really vibrant ecosystem, if that's a horrible word, but there's a whole sort of stack of businesses trying to move as fast as possible. And I think your question is about, are we ready? And we'll come to this later. Is that the great thing is there's all sorts of stimulation for businesses to start and grow. But of course, every single business that needs to grow needs to hire talent, and then there's this massive war for talent that's getting worse and worse and worse. So what we're trying to do is trying to give these free educational tools, not necessarily in coding or not necessarily particularly in hard skills, but more around the business angle of what it is that I think most people really need. We have good stories from people who have literally relocated to the UK and skilled up, got an internship, and now have got jobs. And we've also got plenty of case studies where people have it was just the final piece they needed for the confidence to actually jump out and do their own thing. So it's quite exciting. We've got nearly 2,000 people who've gone through the program, and hopefully those 2,000 people will become 10,000 people, and it really helps the UK to thrive and survive.
Thank you. I think that shows that there are opportunities out there for young people. For me, I would probably say it's a matter of whether they're advertised enough for everyone to take them, or if we needed to raise more opportunities so that they are available to every young person. Because I think at this moment in time, just going to school, doing your GCSEs, getting your A-levels, and finishing is not going to provide you with enough skills in order to have a proper career in such a highly creative workforce at the moment. Would you like to go on to your...
Yeah, I mean, we probably come at this from a slightly different perspective. So D&AD's been around for about 50 years. It was set up by a group of art directors, people like Alan Fletcher, David Bailey, and it was set up to really raise the game, raise the stakes for Creative Commons. And the way they went about doing this was they set up an award to celebrate the best of the best. And that's gone from very much a UK entity to a global award show. We get about 24,000 entries each year, or pieces of work to view, and it's judged by a global panels from the best of the best, across the world, and that gives us quite a unique insight into what we're seeing in the professional community, the types of work that are coming through, and where we think the industry might be going over the next few years. At the other end, we have an educational program which is called New Blood, and we run a series of briefs, workshops, online training tools to try and upskill people, to try and help them bridge that gap between education and the world of work. And it isn't just a graduate program, it is for all young people, admittedly at the minute targeting predominantly university leavers. And what that gives us is an insight into the types of skills that we're seeing coming through from young people, and we can compare it then to the types of skills that we're seeing in that elite professional community. And what we try and do is look at the gap that sits in between those two groups, the best of the best from the student world and the best of the best from the professional, more experienced world. And you start to see some trends emerging. And for us, I think this was called about what's going to be around the corner in the future, but for us quite often it's about looking back at the past and some of those core skills that just don't go away, but are just as important now in a post-digital age as they always have been. And things like bravery of thought, it's always been around, and it's as important, if not more so, now than it was previously, particularly with the amount of clutter and the need to really grab people's attention. We recently spoke to Peter Selter, who said to us, boredom just won't sell. I think that's a really important message for young people to get their head around, and yet in an educational situation, it's very difficult to be brave. It's very difficult to step out of a comfort zone and really do something that might fail because it's a pass-fail distinction. Another area is around core discipline, and we think that yes, traditional craft and discipline skills are essential, but it's that ability to think conceptually that's becoming more and more important, and the need to sort of bounce across disciplines. So to understand what UX means to a copywriter is really important. To understand the interconnection between different disciplines and think about opportunities is really, really exciting, hugely beneficial for the industry, for society. But again, really difficult to teach, really, really hard. It requires collaboration. Education's not great at promoting collaboration. It requires people, again, to think a little bit differently and a bit out of the box. I could go on, but maybe I'll stop there, or else it'll be a D&AD monologue.
Can I just pick up on that, actually? Because obviously I'm, again, coming at it from a slightly different point of view, because I'm coming at it from the employer's point of view. And I think I want to echo what you were just saying, actually. So visual effects, 15 years ago, there was no such thing as a visual effects degree. It didn't exist. And so we took people on from a whole raft of different disciplines, and they learned the tools of the trade on the job. So effectively, they apprenticed, if you want to see it that way. It just wasn't formalised. In the last 15 years, there's been a massive growth in visual effects degrees. What that meant was most of our talent was coming off those degrees. And in the last sort of couple of years, I've seen a real change in our business. And the sort of supervisors and heads of departments are saying to me, actually, what we're not getting from this is we're not getting diversity, and we're not getting bravery of thought, and we're not getting innovation. What we're getting is clones. We're getting people who can use the tools, so they can come in and they can be immediately effective rotoscoping or animating or whatever. But what they're not bringing to our business is thinking about how they might apply those skills in new areas, how they might work cross-discipline. When they're faced with a problem, how do they solve it? Have they had to do that before? And so as a business, what we're doing is trying to work more collaboratively with education. So the visual effects, games and animation industries have come together, recognising that we have cross-discipline skills, and have set up the Next Gen Skills Academy with funding from UKCES. And through that, we're developing qualifications, we're developing apprenticeships, and a number of other things to try and get back to the model of not teaching people the tools, because it's just a tool, but teaching people these sensibilities and the ways of thinking and the ways of being that we're looking for, because, as you said, for us, that's the priority going forward, to keep us on the cutting edge of what's happening.
Can I ask a question? I'll pick up on that. It's interesting because we work with the universities, and if you think about, I think one of the sort of questions we were talking about before this was to say, does our education system provide for what we need? And of course, the education system for many, almost hundreds of years has been designed to do two things. One is to get people into work, the other one is to research and innovate. And if you think about our education, secondary education, where you're doing specific subjects, you specialise in it, you then go to tertiary education if that's the dream, and then you can go to those places. But I think what you're saying is that what's coming out from the education stream isn't really fit for purpose anymore. And I think that's what we're seeing as well, which is part of the reason for the Digital Business Academy, just to add some of those hard skills. And then it sounds amazing. The Next Gen Academy is a really fantastic idea, because what you're doing is overlaying those kind of real world and work examples. And the new Apprenticeships is coming, which actually could disrupt quite a lot of the university's proposition. Yep. But I think that's what we all need.
Yep. Yeah. Definitely.
I think the only thing that I would add to that is how much control employers have to pull certain levers. So I think it's incredibly important, and we're working currently on some exciting things about how we can get a diversity of talent through into the industry. But public funding is always ring-fenced around such tight constraints that things like the apprenticeship schemes, they look fantastic, but I always wonder, are they going to be nimble enough to respond to the kinds of challenges that we've just set out?
No.
Although it's
I can tell you that it's been a nightmare.
It's interesting. It's going to change, because the apprenticeship levy is coming next year, so every employer has to pay 0.5% of their salary bill from 2017, which is soon. Yep. And there's a whole government department of people trying to address those two things. I mean, it's something we feed into very heavily. And the flexibility and nimbleness, and also timeliness is very important, because it takes 5 years to plan these things, in which case the industry's changed completely.
Yeah.
So I think for me that raised the issue as to whether you would argue to fund more apprenticeships or put more money into changing degrees so that they are more fit for purpose. Because I think I found there are a few people I know that do study VFX, but like you're saying, they are just learning skills. They have assignments where it's like, okay, do this, make this, okay, done. But when I looked into apprenticeships, places like Beijing in America are offering, a year's apprenticeship where you are working in a business, you are learning how to act in situations, how to deal with different things. And as whether in the UK we need to put more money into doing that and competing with other countries on that level as to that we can offer those skills, so that when they do go into jobs, they already have been in a business situation, been in a industry situation, or whether it's more appropriate to tailor the education that we already do have. I don't know.
As an employer, I think it's important to do both. I think there is a value to academic rigour, and certainly in certain departments. If I look at our research and development department, for example, we need people who have studied computer science to a very high level and really truly understand how computers think and work and are able to innovate in that sphere. And so I think, absolutely, for us, what apprenticeships are, they're a way of diversifying both the entry points into our business, so we have more entry points into our business for young people, but also diversifying the kinds of people we're bringing in, because it opens up opportunity to people who perhaps can't afford university or for whom university isn't the right route for whatever reason. So I think it's important to support both. I think there needs to be some change in university education for sure, but the onus is on us to try and support that at the same time as introducing other avenues, I think.
I think as well there is a responsibility from employers. We work with some of the most creative people in the world, and yet they all look pretty much the same. That cannot carry on. That is not sustainable. And there's a real movement within advertising and design to really look at themselves and think, we need to change and evolve. We need to remain relevant. And they're seeing other businesses like Vice or other platforms that are doing that incredibly well, and they're appealing to a much broader range. And if we're constantly going to go to the top universities as employers, you kind of know who you're going to get, and you're not going to get that diversity of thought. So different route ways in is absolutely fundamental. I don't think it's an and/or, and I think we've got some amazing institutions, and New Blood proves that. Some of the young people coming through that programme are phenomenally good from amazing institutions. But I just think we need to relax it up a little bit. And the thought that an apprenticeship still asks somebody to have English and maths at a certain level, if you failed it 4 times and you're an amazing, copywriter, coder, whatever, is it worth pursuing? Do you need to make that person do it a 5th time so you can tick that box? And I think we need to just start loosening stuff up a little bit and making it a bit more employer industry focused.
It's true. I mean, look back 20 years when I left school, you could go into all those jobs from 16. I mean, they were all kind of sandwiched college stuff. You could just go into it from 16, and then there was the big revolution in universities, and then everyone's parents thought, yeah, we're going to university with our children. And now we've got the other way, coming the other way. I've got a 15-year-old daughter, and I'm thinking seriously hard about whether she should go to university, which is kind of bizarre. If I'd said that to my parents, they would have been said, well, you don't have a choice. And we need to make sure everybody's educated in those choices, because it's important. Because there's a lot of people coming out of university now that are literally not getting the jobs they need, and they're underemployed, and or they're doing things that they hadn't planned to do in the first place. So yeah, there is a structural issue at the moment. But the government's trying to bash it down. They're trying to break it up. The apprenticeship scheme, in theory, could be great. Germany's built on apprenticeships. Germany's got a very, very strong engineering economy that's based largely on apprenticeships. So there is a blueprint. We've just got to adapt it for our own economy.
I think as a young person, when you go up to a teacher or something, you say, I'm going to do something creative, I want to do something different, the likelihood of getting a yes or a positive response is about 2%. And it is one of those things where if your school does have an arts mark, if they are interested in their arts, they're going to push you, but they'll probably only push the best. And if they're not, I don't see a lot of people that I know coming out of school that have said, I can be creative. Like you said, I know a brilliant coder, but all they ever wanted him to do was science and push maths, because that's what the school promoted, and that's what's going to get them their grades and their Ofsted and their this and their that. And I think it is a thing that there are quite a few teachers, there are people in education that do want to push creativity, but it's how to do that within a school, within an education environment, where there are colleges I know that do it and do it amazingly, places like Ravensbourne, which I went to and I just found amazing. I was like, okay, I want to come here. I don't care, I'm coming here. But I do think it is something which needs to be taken up maybe as a government initiative, just to push the idea of creativity, to have separate days where you just look at different ideas, where, for example, each of your companies could come in and advertise to a school and say, this is what we're doing, would you like to be part of it? But I don't see it happening now, but I do think it's something that will happen in the future, because they'll recognise the potential of it.
It's about linking disciplines, isn't it? I was at a conference at the Science Museum a few weeks ago now. It was a put on by a combination of creative skill set and I'm sorry if I'm going to name them wrong, and this is out on the internet, but I think it was the Creative and Cultural Alliance, and they got together creatives, teachers, and industry, and had an overnight sleepover at the Science Museum where everyone had to brainstorm about how they could bring creativity into schools, not just as an art subject, but across the board. And it was really fascinating. They had some amazing teachers there who were really embracing this, both science and arts teachers, who really embraced it and really took it on board. And they came up with some fantastic ideas of how you could bring creativity into every subject that's taught in school. And not necessarily in a hard way or in a way that was onerous on teachers, that required lots of resources or more of their time or anything like that. Just really quick wins to make people think about how every subject actually involves creative thought. And it was fantastic, and I hope that some of those ideas get taken forward. I know that was the intention from that that gets fed back to education, because I think it's something that definitely needs to happen.
It's a really important point. There's a school in Somerset called Ridlington, and they made a decision about, I don't know, a while ago to prefer to hire teachers who'd come from industry, so they weren't straight from teacher training college. And then what they all got to, when they all sort of got them on board, they put these core themes in, which, creativity, resilience, teamwork and collaboration, and self-confidence. So literally from the day you walk into that school, you're on a stage presenting your ideas to large groups of people, and it just creates this amazing people. And they leave it, a lot of them leave at 16, but they go into very successful careers, and that's not in the curriculum, that's just what they decided to do. And it's just strikingly. I used to judge young enterprise in the area. They won every single year by miles, and they also used to make a lot of money. So you'd have somebody making 15 quid from selling some ties, and then somebody else from this other school had gone to South America, bought a load of seeds, bought some plants, and made 150 grand. It was a completely different mentality. Yeah. It's amazing. When it works incredibly well.
We actually did some work in Hackney recently with 3 schools there, and we were thinking, it's on the creative economy doorstep. And there were some incredible teachers there and some great students. We worked for sort of 3 months on and off on a project, and we had some great support from the industry. But it was amazing how few students knew about the industry. And so I think awareness is a massive issue. I think there's a huge disconnect then between awareness of a growing part of our economy in the UK and the way that it's talked about in policy, and the way it's kind of this sidelined, nice-to-have activity, which if we could articulate what the creative economy is a little bit better, we might be able to lobby a little bit harder, as other industries do more effectively. But the output of that 3 months was incredible, and we're going to continue to do that with the Ideas Foundation and hopefully supported with the Evening Standard over the next 12 months to try and connect more with teachers, to try and connect more with young people, to get them to understand and think along the lines that these two have been talking about some of the skills that are really required and the opportunity that's there.
Yeah, the other thing I think is industry does need to get more involved. I've signed up there's a new volunteering scheme that they're trialling in London, but the idea is for it to go out countrywide if it works, and it's called Enterprise Advisors. And it's basically changing up how careers advice in schools works, and it's having it led by industry rather than having it led by the school. Because in all fairness to the schools, there are lots of industries out there are lots of jobs out there. The possibility of them knowing all of them is very, very slim, and there's no reason really why they should. So industry needs to get in there. And of the however many hundred of us who have signed up to volunteer for this trial, I think there are about 2 of us from the creative industries. So industry needs to stand up as well, I think. It's like you said at the start, we need to stand up and we need to collaborate and we need to get involved in these things if we want things to change. So I think that's important as well.
I think there are a fair few opportunities which I've come across myself. So like the O2 Think Big and the opportunities they run for people, which they're amazing. Like I know people that have done them, and I'm doing a couple myself. And when I was at South Bank talking recently, the woman also said to me about their think tanks and about having people come in. And she went from that, you can spot young people who know that they're going to be good somewhere because they're already coming up with ideas, they're already pushing themselves to be creative. She went, and it gives them a chance to network with industry professionals, with people that are not going to give them a foot up, but going to push them in the right direction so that they can be more open, so they can have those core themes of self-confidence, of being creative and looking at different things. I think what I'd ask is if there's any particular change you'd want in the education framework right now.
I mean, I thought of this before. I mean, I love the idea of everything being free. I mean, whether that's, I'd love it to be free. I love all training to be free, whether that's not free at point of source or there's tax breaks that allow you to offset the cost. And it's not just about school and university, it's also about lifelong education. It's about keeping going. We stop learning at 18, really, and then you learn on the job. And then if you're lucky, you might get some training paid for by your employer. Otherwise, you've got to go onto Udemy and Coursera and FutureLearn if you're that so far motivated. But that's really hard. Or you can go to college. And there just doesn't seem to be any kind of system that allows you to continuously change. Our jobs have been disrupted by technology for thousands of years, ever since we've invented sticks and rocks to break things apart to eat. That will always carry on going, and so we need to be able to have the skills that gives us the flexibility to keep going. Otherwise, we're all going to be on the scrap heap by the time we're 35, and it gets replaced by everybody else. I mean, that's history for me, but you get the point.
Can I have two? The first is that it becomes more valued. I think I spoke to a head teacher yesterday who told me that he fears that for people who have a creative outlet, they are not valued as much within the school environment almost, and that the aim of a school is that every person goes in there and feels a success in an element of what they're learning. If what you're particularly good at isn't seen as the most important thing, it's hugely demotivating, and I think that's an absolute tragedy. So for creative learning to be valued would be number one. And number two would be that we are less obsessed by counting bums on seats in education and we start thinking about outcomes. The fact that if you do a 3-year degree course and after 2 years you're good enough to go straight into industry should be applauded. If that person is then picked up by an agency and they are doing fantastic work after 2 years of degree, wow, that's great, and yet that university loses potential funding, which seems a bizarre situation to be in. So that would be my two.
I was going to say stop incentivising universities for bums on seats as well and start incentivising them for things that count. Also, I think within the university structure, the same thing applies where certain courses, I'm thinking about visual effects specifically here, we find, depending on the university, falls under a whole raft of different faculties. And in very few of them, there are exceptions of course, but in very few of them does the ultimate dean of the school have any idea what visual effects is about or anything. So there's no support there for that course. All of the support is at lecturer level. And I think that needs to change, that whole structure of, if a course sits under a faculty, that faculty needs to have CPD training. They need to understand what they're supporting and what industry is looking for and how they can keep their course relevant. And that shouldn't all fall to the lecturers on that course. So I'd like to see that structural change as well.
Okay, I was just going to open up the discussion to the floor to see if anyone else had any questions. Me? Yes? Have you got a...
Hi, for the first speaker. I've got a question. Is the training available to not so young people?
Our training?
Yes.
Yeah, it's open to everybody as long as you're in the UK. So yeah, and the guys on the screen there, they were obviously not university students, are they?
Because all of you have been talking about young people, but some of us, we are not that young, and maybe we would like to, refocus our careers on the artistic or whatever you're going to call it. Any thoughts on that as well?
No, it's very important, and this is my point earlier, which is to say that it's all about lifelong learning and it's the ability to change and transform your career, because obviously things change in 20... I've got an issue at the moment with teaching children to code in schools. I think it's a good idea, in principle it's a good idea, but those children won't all be coders and they won't all want to be coders. So in 20 years' time when they come out, that job won't be there. There won't be coders around. It'll be completely different frameworks. It'll be totally different. So similarly with the point about adult education, right now there's a big explosion in online courses, transform this, do that and the other. There's very little that goes into actually physical cohort-based learning, if that's what you want. And there's almost nothing in employer-based learning. So there's a big change that's required. But the thing is, digital skills, we provide quite a lot of the knowledge you need, so definitely go and have a look at it. But there's a few other things out there, but it's not very formal.
Yeah, well, one of the things we're looking at actually is, of course, apprenticeships don't have to be entry level. You can have degree level, PhD level apprenticeships if you like, and that's one of the things we're looking at is whether we can have apprenticeships at a higher level in our businesses as well, and what that might look like and what sort of roles that would be for and who that would be for. So it's definitely something we're looking at. Also within the Next Gen Skills Academy, we are also developing and hoping to become sort of a hub of continuing professional development education for our three industries, visual effects, games and animation. So we're also looking at that. You know, we see it as a pipeline of learning, as you were saying, not just as, you know, a sort of jumping off point of learning.
Yeah, and that's the same for D&AD. So we've got programs for people all the way through their careers, from people at school entry level right the way through to people that are winning our ultimate sort of global accolades. So hopefully there'll be something there. Have a look at the website. There's stacks of opportunities to sort of be inspired or get some learning from it, from us. So yeah, please have a look.
Hi, this is a question for Paul.
Yep.
You put Paul right. But anyone can answer actually. So how could the industry contribute towards education promoting collaboration? Because I remember you saying it doesn't do so at the moment. Well, education doesn't promote collaboration as much, but how can the industry contribute towards that? Because you know, it's very easy to get caught up in yourself and what you need to individually do to get, you know, to get sort of far or excel. But I always feel that if you want to excel yourself and go quick, you know, you sort of go yourself. But if you want to go far, you go together. So you know, how can it contribute?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking to a few universities about how best to do this, and we're going to hopefully run a sort of session in the summer about it. But what we do at the university level or the FE level is we set industry briefs, and we try and set a range of briefs that can combine business skills, coding skills, tech skills, production skills, and then we try and, you know, almost force that interaction to occur, and that's where you get, you know, the real richness of response. And then we run various workshops and training days. One that you might want to look at is something called Brief to Broadcast, where we get people to come up with ideas, but let them go very quickly. So they have to come up with ideas individually, but then have to take it to a group setting, which means they've got to let it go very quickly. And I think that's a really hard skill to learn, because you want to hang on to it. So, yeah, your idea is the best idea, and then you've got to take the idea into a production mode. And that production mode might not be the area that you're particularly interested in, but you quickly become accustomed to thinking in a different, or looking at it through a different lens. So there's a whole host of different techniques you can use. Us too, just around the corner, have a really innovative project where I think new starters in their business have to spend a certain amount of time in different parts of the business, just so they're aware of what other people can offer and other people can bring. And then talk to people, you know, get out there, look at the business centres within schools. It sounds like the example that was raised earlier of the school, I think it was in Somerset. They must be working collaboratively across discipline to come up with that kind of innovation. And I think what we can do at D&AD is promote it, and that's kind of what we're trying to do, and promote it and encourage it.
I know what you mean, though. In the thing about the creative industries is that we're a freelance and micro-business driven industry, and it's very, very hard for micro and small businesses to engage with education in any real and ongoing way because they simply don't have the resources. So I totally see where you're coming from. But I think that's why it's really important. What we do have as industry, even small and micro businesses, is relationships with organisations like D&AD and Creative Skill Sets and the Creative and Cultural Alliance and the Creative Industries Federation. There are lots of organisations out there, and it's by getting your voice into those organisations who then can work with education and can collaborate and can come up with innovative ways of working with education that you can have that influence. You know, you don't necessarily, you know, we're fortunate at Framestore, we're a large enough business that we can have the influence directly, but I appreciate not everyone's in that position. But yeah, I think it's about working with the right organisation to help with that.
Thank you.
Hello. I was just wondering, you've mentioned a lot of problems with the education in the UK and supporting creativity. Is there anywhere in the world that does it particularly well, or somewhere where we can learn from?
I mean, my only kind of point of reference is Germany. I lived there for 4 years until recently, and they have a very structured way of doing everything, let alone education. But particularly in education, when you're 10 or 11, your teacher makes a decision. It's pretty harsh, whether you're going to be a doctor, an engineer, or a plumber. I mean, it's not quite that simple, but that's effectively what's happening. So there's three different strands of schools. But what it does do, it makes sure that the economy is balanced. And if you go into the kind of practitioner route, then there are all sorts of things that you get involved in, a lot of day release work, a lot of tertiary education. But the result is actually, structurally, Germany is pretty well placed for capitalising on all sorts of technology trends. So, I mean, that's my only one, but it's pretty good. There's obviously lots of downsides with that, but at the same time, it seems to work them pretty well, and they're doing okay.
I mean, I would say that we've got some amazing arts universities. You know, I don't think we should bash them over the head. You know, that they are world leading. I think it's about ensuring that we remain world leading, and we don't start kind of digging holes under the system. And I think that's going to start happening with things like EBAC and stuff like that, where at the younger age it really starts to be the rug is pulled under the feet. I think we could do a whole host of things to get different routeways into industry, learn from Germany, Finland, other countries. But my one fear, having spent some time in Germany myself, was that it is very rigid. And, you know, if you are on a path, it is quite difficult to do the kind of zigzaggy thing that we've been talking about today. So I would say I haven't come across the ideal. I know there's some work going on around careers advice, which has been looking at Finland, Ireland, Hong Kong, a few other places. They're starting to piece together what that might look like for the UK. So perhaps keep an eye on that.
For us specifically in visual effects, and again, I think it comes back to there's some good and there's some bad, and there's nothing that's perfect, but schools in France have been particularly successful for us. We have quite a lot of French employees who've come off those courses. But there's two sides to that. The good is, the reason for that is that creative education in France is taken very seriously. It is considered equal to all other forms of education. I think that's where that comes from. You know, they are allowed to be creative from a very young age, and it's not frowned upon. Also, it's sort of good and sort of bad at the same time. The education in France for our industries tends to be private rather than state-run. So what that means is the courses can be very flexible. They can change at the drop of a hat. You know, they don't have to stick to a rigid curriculum. They don't have to necessarily include any academic rigor unless they choose to. You know, so it's very, very flexible, and it can respond to industry changes very, very quickly. Also, about 75% of their teaching staff have been in industry within the last couple of years, so all of their education is from people in industry. But the downside is it's very, very expensive for their students. So again, it's not perfect. They've got a lot of things right, but the fact that it's so expensive obviously means that it only reaches a certain portion of society. So that's not great from a diversity or innovation point of view. So yeah, I don't think there's anywhere that's got it exactly right.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Hello, just to touch on the point about Germany, although it might be a bit of more rigid structure in terms of education, it is a sort of, there are cities in Germany, for example, in Berlin, where it's a lot cheaper to be able to live, and that's something that came up earlier on in the week within our discussions, that London is a very expensive city to allow ourselves to be creative. And if we talk about actually allowing ourselves to be creative, it comes to that point of knowing how to do it. And we're talking a lot about skills here. Do you think that you need to include the education as to how to make it happen in terms of how you get the funding and things like that to make your idea a reality?
Well, I lived in Berlin for 2 years until recently, and yes, it is very cheap to live there, but at the same time, there aren't the things that you have in London. London is incredibly rich in terms of infrastructure and ambition and all sorts of things. Germany and Berlin is obviously a new young city with lots of new young people in it. So it's very different. I think, you know, London's great. The UK is you know, obviously completely skewed by the London kind of conversation. What Germany has is that it's much more spread around a whole country. It's much less unbalanced, and that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. So if you've got a business that's growing in London, you know, you have all the lovely sort of nutrients you need, except for ability to fast scale and talent, and also cost of operations and people. If you can then decentralise and go to the different parts of the UK, then that's a perfect strategy. But until we've got enough talent in those cities, it's going to be almost impossible, as well as the investment required. So I think that's going back. I mean, obviously that's what TechCity is thinking about all the time, is how we allow businesses to grow and thrive without having to stay in the middle of the capital.
I mean, yeah, living costs I think is a huge issue without a doubt. But I would not have any skills in trying to tackle it. So I don't know quite what you do about housing costs. There's a whole host of ideas out there, but it's such a difficult, nut to crack. And I think it is interesting seeing, Manchester, the Bristols, Birmingham, Leeds. There are hubs that are starting to emerge and develop, and I think that's really interesting. And it'll be interesting to see how that continues in the future.
Just to go to my other question about how we include the policies and the funding into the education as well, rather than just skills. What are your thoughts on those areas?
Yeah, I mean, we've, in terms of our New Blood programme, which is kind of this educational programme that bridges what you learn at school and the world of work, that is a key aim of it. And how do you value an idea? It's incredibly difficult. And for a young person, particularly in the times of mass crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, how do you hold on to your value and try and put a price against that value? It's really difficult, and we've been working with various startups and people that advise startups to try and talk to some of our New Blood entrants and New Blood winners about how to go about doing that. And I think it's something that schools and education universities need to get their head around pretty quickly. The amount of stuff now that's being asked by corporates on the internet and people are responding to, people need to be aware of what they're giving away, I think, and what IP is and how you make the most out of it.
But also in terms of the Bristol, I live in Bristol, so I commute into London, which I'd rather not do. Bristol is sort of creating its own identity as being very strong in creative arts, but also very strong in engineering and aviation, because that's kind of what they are. And there's other cities around the UK that are doing the same thing, so it's almost creating their own superpower that then they're marketing themselves as, and then you create the cluster, and then everybody knows as a nation where you can go for these various different things. It's just fantastic, but it's taking time.
I think one point that I'd raise on that is how to be creative as individuals when you are bridging that gap from education to going into an industry. So at the moment, I'm looking to work on a project to have like a showcase, which is just young people learning how to be creative, to show off their skills so that they have something to show an industry, so that they can say, like, for example, I did the VFX for the showcase, I did the digital media for it, I did the arts for it, or the dance piece for it. And in that, I found so many issues. Like, I think the first one being, when I advertised it, I literally just wrote, looking for creative individuals in London. First responses I've got, I'm not creative. I was like, okay, what does that mean? I can't sing, can't dance, can't do art. So your point is, well, that means I'm not creative. And I think it's the way that creativity is projected to young people at school, what the definition of it is when they're taught and when they're given things to do. I said, okay, you do science, do you like doing experiments? Yes. Okay, that means you're creative, you're looking to do something different. And then the second thing was to get funding itself. Like now, I can't really go to the Arts Council and say I don't have an arts mark, I'm not an organisation, it's just me, and even with the O2, I applied to do a Think Big project, and the application itself was so tedious in the way that it was almost taking away the creativity because you had to label it into all these little boxes it had to fit into, rather than, say, getting up on a stage saying, here you go, this is my idea, would you like to sponsor it, would you like to fund it? And I think that's something that, if was made an opportunity for young people, would create a lot more drive to be creative and to express that creativity for them. That was just something that I think's come up as I've been working towards it.
Hello, I've just got a left field question. I don't really see the creative industry sort of represented in Parliament or any kind of legislation. You were saying only 2 people out of hundreds of people have volunteered. Why do you think it is that the creative industry isn't represented at all?
I think it partly comes back to what Paul said earlier and about the definition of the creative industries and what that encompasses and what it doesn't, and who is represented by that, and who do you get. This is something we're coming up against with the new apprenticeship setup. So the organisation that's going to look after that going forward is going to be this new Institute of Apprenticeships, and apparently there's going to be a member of the institute that represents each of the industry groups, and one of those will be the creative industries. And the question becomes, who is this unicorn person who can speak to fashion and textiles, to radio, to dance, to visual effects, and everything in between? Who is this person that can speak to that? The problem is it's so broad that it becomes very tricky. So, I mean, the Creative Industries Council are trying to be that sort of body, and they're trying to be that representative creative skill set, lobby government on a lot of things, or for the areas they represent at least. So there are people trying to do it, but it is very tricky because it's such a broad group of organisations and approaches and skills that it's very hard, I think.
There is representation of government. I mean, the trouble is there's three departments. So there's Department for Education, the Department of Culture, Innovation and Skills, and then BIS, which is the business department. And Ed Vasey, who is the cultural minister, he's obviously super passionate about the creative industries. You have Creative England. The danger is it's slightly diluted because there's so many things going on. It's actually, you almost need to sort of laser guide everything together in one place. You know, if you said to Ed Vasey, why aren't you standing up for the cultural industries, he'd say, what are you talking about? Because he'd spend all his time on this stuff. But the trouble is, to filter it down to everybody else so that they know what's going on, to actually make a difference is difficult. And especially across three different departments, it's also very difficult. So I think it's changing. There's definitely a will and need in government. I mean, they were so excited about Star Wars being part of, you know, it's a UK economy thing. He's even got his name on the end of it. And they're doing everything they can to promote and you know, really push that kind of innovation through the UK. So it's probably, they just got a PR issue. They need to tell more people what they're doing. Creative England is a good organisation as well. I mean, they're doing well.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think there are things happening. But if you look at kind of any industrial strategy that tends to come out of government, you wouldn't say it was heavily creatively driven. And that is a problem. And that means that when you look at the filtering that down to what an education system needs to deliver, it starts to become very linear. And that means creativity starts to get pushed out. And, you know, for me, the EBAC is a huge concern. If you're judging a school purely on a set of subjects, none of which are deemed, you know, creative, albeit we understand creativity can manifest itself in different subjects, but traditional creative subjects, design, art, then, you know, you're in a problem because you've already put it down a level, and then you've got an economy which is doing extremely well through its creative industries, and the two just aren't matching up at the minute. I think it's, you know, it needs a real shake-up. It needs someone to be able to sort of bash some of these doors down. But we are a fragmented industry, and that means our voice is always quite disparate. You look at the car industry, they can pull together some massive hitters and go and knock on some doors pretty quickly, and that's sometimes what it takes in government. Whereas in the creative industry, it's so disparate, so different, it quite often gets lost and watered down. I think that's a real problem.
Hi. You are talking about this fragmented industry and everything, and I think the main problem also is that when I've studied fine arts, and when I was studying, I've never done a project with someone from physics or someone from, I don't know, anything. So when you get the business side, and when you begin to work and you do projects with another people with multidisciplinary profiles and teams with everybody from everything, then is when you begin to realize things. And I think if we can introduce that from the schools, from the universities, then will be a change. Like if I can do a project with another university that they do another thing, then so I think, yeah, it's something like begin to mix more different profiles from the beginning of everything in the schools. So what
I think that's happening. In some universities now, they're doing, it doesn't matter what you're studying, there's an entrepreneurship lecture in there. So that is definitely changing this. I'm seeing that happening now.
Yeah, I think that's something I'm doing at the moment. So on the first week when I went into university, all the lecturers, so I study law, regardless of what you were studying, kind of pushed you to join this ready program. So we went in and it was full of like a lecture hall just like this, and they had PhD students from different subjects who then mentored groups which they'd pick specifically, so that one person would be from computer science, one person would be from law, one person would be doing VFX. And you were put together and given a brief. And we've spent since September to January working on this brief, presenting it, but with the idea being that you do have to work around different timetables, work around different skills, people that learn different things. I mean, things that I'd never heard of. So doing law, I have lectures and seminars that are workshop, and there were people that had things like labs and, you know, when we've got experiments and things like this, and you, even just learning about different areas and things that are happening in your own university, it's bringing you into that idea to not be so narrow-minded and so ignorant that when you get into an industry, it's just going to be people that have done the same thing as you. Because I think when I started university, it was almost like everyone had that mindset that they were going to study something, they were going to go to get a job, and people would have done the same things as them. I think people found that straight away when they were speaking about A-levels, and you had people that were from abroad or had done apprenticeships and things. So it's starting. As to whether it's being done by a lot of people, I wouldn't say so, because I think the first week we started out with a full lecture hall. And the second week, like, it was the front 2 rows, that was it. And you had about 4 teams. I think it's got to be pushed more, but then there is that sense that young people may not necessarily realise how much of a need it is for them to get these skills right now, because you're not going to get it when you're 25 or when you're 30 and you're trying to work at a job and look after a family, because you just don't have the time. So yeah, there is that importance that needs to be recognised, I'd say, from young people ourselves.
Yep, I completely agree with your point. It's fundamental. And we run, our student award winners or New Blood award winners don't have to be students. They have an opportunity to come to a boot camp, which WPP sponsor, which means it's completely free. They're from all over the world. And I think that is another slant on what you're saying, that there's a huge cultural exchange value that it'll be great if education realised that if you bring people from different cultures, different backgrounds, it's so rich. And we put, I think in the last one we had 17 different nations represented, and we put them in teams, completely mixed background, discipline, educational route, and it's phenomenally important and successful in the way it delivers projects at the end of it. So I would just echo what you've said, basically.
Do we have any more questions? No? That it? Has anyone got, I think, just maybe any final words you've got to say about the creative industry, or what you want to happen, or anything?
Well, I'll just leave saying we're in an incredibly exciting time with massive innovation and change. The UK is in a position, it finds itself in leading the world with the highest class of universities, like you were saying earlier. We're in a really, really strong position. The main thing is that we can bring the population along at the same time and not rely on a lot of people from everywhere else. I mean, it's fantastic that we have people from everywhere else, but at the same time, we need to also, make sure that we're bringing everybody else, people who have grown up here at the same part of the journey.
Yeah, it's quite difficult to summarise. I mean, I think from my perspective, that if we go back to the original question of skill needs, skill gaps, I think what our message would be that sort of everything and nothing has changed, that those core skills are still as important as they always have been. Think big, ideas really matter, storytelling is going to be more and more important, but look at it through a different lens that, as has just been said, technology is making opportunities come to the fore endlessly, and it's just about using those disciplines in slightly different ways. And if I could make one plug, it would be to try and think more about purpose, profit, creativity altogether, because I think that's a huge skill need in the industry. I don't think we think creatively enough about problem solving on the biggest scale and getting brands and companies involved in some of the solutions that we need over the next sort of 50 years or whatever it may be. And yet we have some of the best creative thinkers in the world in the UK to do that.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to follow on from that, and I'm just going to make my final words encouraging more employers to get involved in the conversation, really, and encourage more employers to take ownership of this, because that's the way government's moving, clearly. That's clearly their policy, is to push this on to employers. So here's our opportunity. We've been moaning about it for the last however long. government's giving us the opportunity, let's take it and let's really shape this and make it what we need it to be going forward.
I think I'd say just thank you to our panellists then. So thank you.
Thank you.